What is up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the NerdBall Fantasy Football Show. I am your humble host, Pete Rogers, and I am joined this week by just one of the nerds. It is the resident old man, Clark Barnes. Clark, how you doing today?
Doing great, Pete.
Yeah! You ready for some spooky season?
I am. I love Halloween. It's a good... Anyway, we'll get into that. It's a good time of year.
It's a great time of year. It's as a first-time home. I am a first-time homeowner, but also as the first Halloween owning a home. We haven't quite gone full out in our decorations. We feel like that's going to be you build on that. You build on what you have. But we got a good graveyard going in the front yard with some some skeletons trying to dig their way out of the ground and all that good stuff. My ultimate dream. Yeah, exactly. Classic. My ultimate dream is that I don't know how I'm going to do it with the way that our front yard is situated, but my dream is to have a human-sized scarecrow either sitting or standing by the sidewalk that's in front of our house. And sometimes it's just a human-sized scarecrow that's filled with straw. And sometimes it's me in the exact same outfit, and you're never quite sure which. And one of them comes and get you.
I am all for this. That has been done a couple of times when I was a weein, some guy holding the candy and you think it's just all fake. Pete, I'm very pleased. I'm going to live vicariously through you.
This was back in the 50s?
Yes. Back around the time when Halloween was first invented. This is going to dovetail nicely into one of our segments later, establishing that I'm old. So this is going great.
Perfect. That's what it's here for. You are the resident old man after all. All right. As always, we are going to talk fantasy football. We are going to talk some week 7 must starts. But before we're going to do that, we are going to talk about our weekly nerdgasm. Clark, what was your nerdgasm this week?
Oh, we're already talking about it. So it's Halloween season. And so I love scary movies, one of my favorite genres. And so keeping in the old man of the podcast, I have two of my favorite oldies that people may not have seen. And we're going to go with the 1978 zombie classic, George Romero's original Dawn of the Dead. Fantastic. It's sort of where the genre started. Can't be enough. Doing a whole lot with just a little practical effects. Fantastic movie. Pete, have you seen it?
I have not seen Dawn of the Dead. I will say, Clark, that I am not a big scare guy. I get scared very easily, and my imagination likes to then hold on to whatever I get scared by and cling to it for the next 48 hours, and I can't sleep.
Well, do not watch the next one. Dawn of the Dead is like
Dawn of the Dead,
scary.
I feel like I can watch it because it's like zombies, which somehow zombies don't quite get me, because especially like the slow trotting zombies, it's like, okay, you just outrun them. Like,
and we've been saturated with it lately.
The zombie movie, especially an old zombie movie, I'm sure I can do it. We just got our couch down in the basement. We have our big screen TV. For Halloween, I'll make Bex and I will watch Dawn of the Dead just for you, Clark.
Nice. Well, then one you should not watch, one that I feel is actually a good petrifying old movie, Rosemary's Baby, 1968 gem. I don't want to spoil it, but
things don't go well for Rosemary.
It's one of those I would call this like a classic movie trope of you have to be an adult and be willing to sit through a movie. The whole movie almost is built up, and then you're so surprised in the end. Anyway, so those are my two recommendations. If you're looking for scary movies that are maybe not the most modern that you've seen already, classic Dawn of the Dead. The remake of Dawn of the Dead is also very good, but I'm partial to the original. And then Rosemary's Baby legitimately F's with your head and is like, I think legit psychologically terrifying.
All right. At some point, maybe I'll watch it like during the day. I can watch
during the day upstairs.
Yeah.
Bright lights.
Before we were recording, we were talking about our both of our lighting system. And it'll be every light in my house will be on, and I'll be sitting and it'll be bright outside. And I'll be like, okay, now I'm going to watch Rosemary's Baby. This is the only time where I can actually watch a truly horror movie.
And it'll be the only time where dad is responsible for every light in the house being on.
Exactly. It'll be entirely my fault that literally every light bulb that we own is turned on. Yeah. Now, scary movies, I want to get into them, and I feel like I'm starting to allow myself to get more and more into them, but it's only like the ones that I've only really seen are ones that have a humorous or some sort of either a humorous or just some sort of twist to it. Like I really enjoyed Cabin in the Woods.
Yeah,
which is has like some very typical horror elements, but also is like a variation on that genre, which I liked. And then I'm trying to think what other. I mean, I love. It's not like your typical horror, but it is sci-fi horror. I mean, I love Alien. That's a perfect film.
And when we start our movie watching podcast, that's always fun to see. Like, Jurassic Park's kind of a horror movie, but that's sci-fi, and so is Alien. Anyway, yeah.
I have to. Yeah. Okay, maybe this Halloween I'll start dipping my toe into the true horror of horror movies. I will say, final thought on this. I am willing to watch true horror movies. I am not willing to watch like violence porn or just like the whole like Saw series and Hostel and like all of that shit. No, I'm not just gonna watch people just get like butchered because it's like, oh, it's gross. No.
Yeah. Gore for gore's sake was an unfortunate turn that movies took there for a while.
Yeah. Though Blumhouse made a lot of money off of it.
Well, people are stupid, so
yeah, people are dumb. All right, my nerdgasm for this last week. I will talk football. We will talk football. You hate to see the situation in which this was brought to the attention of the national spotlight. But I have to give some shout out. Kenneth Walker is good at football, and it is like we give so much shit to Pete Carroll for his running back picks and for like how this team is constructed. Somehow, first of all, like the Seahawks, Geno Smith balling out. But more so, like, you hate to see that Rashad Penny had to get injured in order for Kenneth Walker to like take center stage in this offense. But it has been a revelation since he has taken over this backfield. He's had back-to-back 85-plus yard games. He's already has 5 15-plus yard runs, which is tied for 5th amongst running backs on just 44 attempts. And I think the thing that a lot of people have been oohing and on over him over these last 2 weeks, but like the thing that really got me is this last week, he had a jump cut getting out of the backfield where he cleared, I don't even know, like 5 feet in a jump, and then landed and just instantly accelerated for a big gain. Like, his athleticism jumps off the page. And he is a guy where sometimes in fantasy football, I feel like you'll have an injury and the running back, the number 2 running back on that team is like, everyone's like, this is it. This is the league winner. This is who you spend all your fab on. And sometimes, feels like more often than not, that doesn't happen, right? The team spreads their touches around, blah, 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 blah. This is like Kenneth Walker through 2 weeks has felt like, yes, everything was right. He is like getting 90% of the opportunity share in Seattle, and he is doing absolutely the most with it. And it's just, you hate to see how he got thrust into the spotlight, but you love to see how productive and how good he has looked playing football for the Seahawks.
Yeah, this is a good one. And it's been an absolute roller coaster. Jordan out on assignment tonight, not with us. I know that he likes to chop up the dynasty, but I know you do, Pete, too, as well. Kenneth Walker was legit number 2 overall pick in dynasty. Maybe 2, 3, 4. He's not getting past 4.
Right. He was the clear RB2, and you're getting him in the top 3 or 4 picks.
And we knew, or like we felt reasonably assured that he was going to be stuck behind Rashad Penny. And even with that, he was number 2. So huge kudos to him. And then, unfortunately, we saw what we thought we would see, which is Rashad Penny is the man, and he's getting all the touches. He looks okay. And so Walker's just not going to play very much. And then, unfortunately, Penny gets hurt. Walker steps in, like you said, absolutely blowing it up, meeting every expectation that all of those lusty dynasty owners had. I felt kind of silly. He's one of those backups that, I'm sure we wrote an article that said this too, is like, if Kenneth Walker is out there, you should go get him. But he wasn't available. He's kind of like Alexander Madison in a lot of leagues. Like, he's rostered, right? People know that he's good. Man, And just in general, I was very wrong about the Stinkattle Stinkhawks. I might have to stop calling them that.
I know. Who would have seen that Geno Smith would put together the best quarterback performance through 6 weeks that the NFL is seeing right now? It is quite incredible. And it really is like, there's so many narrative street tropes that are being thrown around, but like, you can't help but notice Geno Smith taking off. Russell Wilson, not so much.
Yeah, I'm betting on Wilson long term.
Yeah,
but
so are the Broncos. They're paying him, $500 million.
I'm betting on Geno. Moving forward, picked him up in a super flex league where no one wanted him. Tried to trade him for 4 weeks, and then all of a sudden was like, well, I guess I should start starting him.
I guess I'll keep the quarterback 3 in fantasy right now.
Yeah. So, it's funny how things work out. But yeah, Walker's if you can trade for him, I mean, I know this is always a silly phrase, but like, this should continue all year.
Yeah. No, it just feels like one of those instances where we've talked about this on the show all the time, Clark. You especially have always said that it's like, it is so easy in fantasy to predict misses than it is to predict hits. And so when everyone is just right on a guy, it means something. Like it's awesome. Yeah, it's impressive to see.
We get to celebrate as a community. And you almost gave Pete Carroll credit. And like, almost. Look, man, broken clock's right twice a day. I'm not ready to give too much credit there. If you keep drafting running backs in the first 2 rounds,
you'll hit one of them.
But anyway, whatever. Go Seahawks. I'm happy. I think I predicted them to at about 2 wins, and someone on Twitter got upset with me. That guy was right.
Sorry. Hey, shout out to you, random person on Twitter who had beef with Clark. That was well-founded beef. It was raised to had a good life, and it was enjoyed by those who consumed it. Let's talk week 7. Let's move on to the week 7 must-starts. And I'll start us off with also a running back whom was very hot in the dynasty world. I just traded for him in my dynasty league. In fact, I traded for him in every single league I am in because that is how excited I am about this player moving forward. Must start for this week is Travis Etienne versus the Giants. Over the last 2 weeks, he is outsnapped. He has had a higher opportunity share than James Robinson, and it seems like he is really starting to cement himself, even if it's not the back. Certainly the 1A to James Robinson's 1B. He's averaging 7.87 yards per carry in those games, which is just absurd. So we're only going to see his efficiency will probably drop, but we're going to see his touches increase. Now, on paper, this is a tough matchup. The Giants defense is allowing the 12th fewest fantasy points to running backs on a per game basis and the 5th fewest touches. However, do not let this deter you because they are allowing 5.5 yards per carry, which is the 2nd most, and 117.8 yards per game, which is the 6th most. So even though the reason why they're not giving up a lot of fantasy points, they're not giving up touchdowns, and they're not giving up a whole lot of touches in the passing game, which obviously in a PPR league, that's where you're getting points. I'm confidently starting Etienne this week as a high-end RB2, and I'm going to do that for the rest of the season. And that is why your boy went out and I traded absolutely everything in order to make sure he was on my team in every single one of my leagues.
I like it. I mean, Etienne is I like big backs.
And you cannot lie?
I will not lie about it. But there's value in the smaller guys. So in the Ezekiel Elliott versus Tony Pollard argument, for a couple of years, it's been like, okay, Tony Pollard does look electric and he looks awesome. But when you're ripping off those big runs on 3rd and 28 and it's an 18-yard run, we need to put some context on these numbers. Now we're seeing Pollard get a legit workload and his averages are starting to come down a little bit, but he is still obviously very explosive. What I'm making here is that James Robinson still looks awesome and he is still doing very well, but Etienne is getting better as the year goes on. Doug Peterson is getting him out in space, and if Etienne has only one thing, it's speed. Yeah, and he's taking advantage of his opportunity. So I'm a little bit colder on him than you, just because the Jaguars in general, I think, are overachieving a bit. I feel
like you have some negative thoughts generally about the Jaguars, but I could be misremembering.
They're not very good, but they're getting better. The coach is doing well. Trevor Lawrence may surprisingly end up being
literally
albatross in the offense's neck.
Oh my God. Literally the week that I benched him, not because he, I was just like, is this the matchup that I really trust? He had been having a couple bad games. I benched him for Daniel Jones, still got the win. But of course, that's the week that Trevor Lawrence decides that he's going to be a gazelle in the Serengeti and run for 2 touchdowns or whatever.
But, everyone who started Juju last week, you're welcome. I finally benched him.
Yeah. That's what happens. As soon as he moved to the bench. Clark, do you believe in the not benching, but just like flexing a player to just give them a little incentive? You're not getting them out of your.
It's rare that I find a superstition that I won't believe in or convince myself is accurate when I'm setting lineups. Yeah.
Perfect. Good. Yeah. Who's a must start for you this week?
Well, I'm going to stick with running back. So we are in. It's a tough bye week. We've got the Bills, Rams, Vikings, Eagles. I mean, there's a ton.
That's all fantasy gold right there.
Relying on. Yeah, there's a ton of people relying on. So my must start is really just a desperation start, and must starts clothing. Brian Robinson for the Commanders is the way I'm sneaking in the door. Brian Robinson is an obvious must start. But with Taylor Heineke understanding, J.D. Mckissick should be in your plans if you're having a hard time at running back, especially in PPR. Heineke is a dump-off king. The Commanders are probably going to lose. The Packers are doing good against running backs. I think they're like 25th. But I think 8, 9, 10 targets for Mckissick isn't off the table this week. So obviously Brian Robinson put up 60 yards and a touchdown in his first real start. Ooh, excited about that.
Love it.
Talked about him all offseason. But then J.D. Mckissick also, if you're a little desperate, you could do a lot worse than a running back who might see, again, 10 targets. So not spectacular, but we just got to get through this week. My teams are looking tough.
So first of all, I'm gonna pick your brain on Brian Robinson because I've got a start sit dilemma that I'm currently trying to figure out. But J.D. McKissick, I think, is a great call because J.D. McKissick, again, he did this last year too, where he's just kind of quietly a very solid, reliable back. Let me bring up some high level analytics right now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He's RB7 in neck consistency efficiency rating that we track. So he's already a top back there. And then he's also 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He's 6 in the NFL in target share for running backs with 14.2% of the targets for Washington. So that, like you said, with Taylor Heineke under center, that's probably going to increase. And we've already seen that he's with the work that he's getting, he's seeing a consistent workload, whether or not that's elite or mid-tier, it's consistent. And he's being efficient with those touches, hence being a top running back in neck rating. In a plus matchup for him, especially in a plus game plan situation, J.D. McKissick, I think, is a really good call for someone who's like probably available on your waivers, depending on your league depth. And if you are in a bye week apocalypse and you need some guy, J.D. McKissick, I think, is a great call. How do I fit Brian Robinson into my starting lineup this week? Because I just don't think the only way I feel like I can fit him in is being really bold and benching Christian McCaffrey.
I mean, so kudos on your team.
Thank you.
Because if that's the decision you're making, I know you just said Brian Robinson is a must start, but not over Christian McCaffrey. Yeah. Even if old PJ Walker's slinging it back there again for the Panthers.
That's true. Christian McCaffrey, this man's season is, I feel like it will go down in the Fantasy Hall of Fame. How this offense is just inept, completely broken, and yet he has been the most consistent running back and efficient running back in terms of neck rating, and is currently the RB4 in half point PPR. Like, it's absurd. This man is absurd. Like, literally, there's no one on this team for defenses to worry about other than Christian McCaffrey. And yet somehow this man is still averaging 60, almost 17 half-point PPR points a game.
Yeah, I mean, and since we're talking about the Panthers, this might be the last time this year. How about that stroke of Machiavellian genius by Robbie Anderson? I mean, if you can jettison yourself from the Panthers, wow. Good job. First of all, he got away from the Jets earlier in his career.
Robbie Anderson.
And now he's getting away from Carolina after getting the big contract. not like Arizona's a giant upgrade or anything, but it is an upgrade. Kudos to Robbie Anderson, man.
Robbie Anderson playing the game. Playing the game. Well done. Well done. Going from catching balls from Sam Darnold to Sam Darnold again, and then to Baker Mayfield, now to Kyler Murray. And I mean, he fits a need. I mean, it sucks that Marquise Brown went down with a serious injury after the season that he was having. And they're getting D-Hop back, obviously. And I'm hoping Rondell Moore is going to continue to build on what we've seen from him. But Robbie Anderson could be something in Arizona. We'll see. Or it could just completely fail.
Beginning of the year, Robbie Anderson was an end of the bench kind of guy for me. I had him in several places. Kind of on my weak teams, I'm holding on to him. On my strong teams, he's been jettisoned. I'm definitely more interested in him now as third, fourth. I'm going to squint if I like the matchup wide receiver. Because I think the plans are for him to play this week, and to me that means Kyler Murray's going to be in the huddle calling the play, and he goes, "Robbie, you go deep," and then that's just going to be. Like there'll be no option routes.
It's just run fast in a straight line and I'll throw it. Yeah. We love those plays.
You get 4 of those targets, baby. That makes a week.
That's a game wrecker. All right, my second must start this week. Should come as no surprise to anyone. We're going to stick with the Packers Commanders game. It is the Allen Lazard just must start. He is the wide receiver 1 in neck rating, speaking of consistency and efficiency, and the wide receiver 8 in per rating, averaging 1.84 fantasy points per target. He has scored a touchdown in 4 out of his 5 games. And the genius who's operating the NerdBall Twitter account, I don't want to say who it is, but it might be his name might rhyme with Smeater, tweeted out just as before we record this some more facts about Allen Lazard since week 3. So week 3 to week 6, he has been the wide receiver 9 in half-point PPR. Washington's giving up 1.3 touchdowns per game to wide receivers, the 3rd most, 33.8 points per game, tied for the 4th most. He is going to consistently get you exactly what he has done all year, and that is mid to high level wide receiver 2 numbers with the potential to be an elite wide receiver 1.
Yeah, I like it. And he is the type of player that we see in fantasy, often is that it's a not very exciting number 1 option for a team. And, because of injury and because he's not an especially exciting option, it's taken him a little while to get going. But like you said, since week 3, he's been producing, and you watch the game and he is the number 1.
He's locked it down.
Whatever. But he's the main guy.
Yes.
And, when your main guy in offense, even a struggling offense like the Packers, I'm with you. I think Dobbs is a fine start in this one too. Not as good. I would go Lazard over Dobbs, but I like it. That's a good one.
Yeah. I know we're only 6 or 7 weeks into the NFL season, the fantasy season, but your boy's giving himself a little pat on the back for that, hyping up Allen Lazard to the stratosphere this offseason.
Yeah. Celebrate those wins and those misses. We don't even talk about that.
This. I hyped him up too much, though, to my home league because he got sniped the pick before me, which not thrilled about. Sure. But we take our lumps, Clark. We take our lumps. Who's your second must start this week?
Well, I've got a wide receiver too, and we talked about him just a second ago. It's Juju. Now, I don't know if this is chasing the good game because that can be a maddening experience. All you Taysom Hill no, it's like, oh, Taysom Hill scored 40 points on my bench. Awesome. I'm going to put him in. Oh, Taysom Hill scored 4 points. Great.
Taysom Hill, you never
Thanks,
trust.
Everybody. But Juju had a big game. He looks good. I mean, the Kansas City receiving core is really not great. And it's not like Juju's blowing him out of the water or anything, but he's clearly the best receiver, wide receiver, the best receiver not named Travis Kelce on the team. So I'm going to fire him up. Additionally, throwing in a little desperation start, any other Kansas City wide receiver. Who knows?
Take your pick.
If they're available, take a shot. I mean, even Sky Moore, he's starting to get a little bit more run and getting a little bit more involved. I like Juju, but anyone out on that waiver wire can get you by this week.
Yeah, they play the 49ers, who've been good against wide receivers. They are giving up a good amount of yardage. They're giving up the 5th fewest points, but I think the thing that you have to think about here is game script, because the Chiefs defense has not been good. And the 49ers offense is looking pretty good under Jimmy G. And so this could be a game where you kind of have to, Patrick Mahomes is going to have to kind of sling it to keep the Chiefs maybe in it, or it's just going to be maybe a more offensively driven game than we're used to from the 49ers. And that obviously bodes well for whom should be the Chiefs' number one wide receiver. I mean, it feels like it's not a stretch of the imagination to think that given this team's construction that Juju Smith-Schuster should be pretty handedly their top wide receiver, but maybe that is not proven to be the case so far.
I mean, I think that I'd have to check. I think he's on pace for the most targets and yards, and I would be surprised if that doesn't end up that way. But I was wrong in that at the beginning of the year, I thought it was going to be by a mile. Yeah. And well, apparently it's gonna be a lot closer, but he still is the most veteran, oldest wide receiver, and at like 25, that's amazing. Like, anyway, God,
it's a young team there. All right, well, there you go. There's some must starts for you for Week 7 fantasy action, and now it is time for our weekly top 5. And this week, Clark is going to bring us some top 5 players, his top 5 players, to buy low on as we approach maybe a trade deadline in your league, or at the very least, approaching that halfway point in the season where maybe some guys are going to be set up for a big second half of the year, and you should be buying low on them now before that escalation hits.
Yeah, and we're going to start out with the most expensive. DeAndre Hopkins is coming back, and this is a tricky one. So either you play in a very shallow league and you should spend all your fab on Hopkins, or the person who drafted Hopkins has been sitting on him for 6 weeks. That is a lot of investment. And unless you're 5-1, 4-2, you may be getting desperate in that bet on the 30-some-odd-year-old DeAndre Hopkins coming back and hitting the ground running. That could be questionable for you. So I just have a couple of names that I give up for him from the receiver world. Amon-Ra St. Brown finding some injury, but when he comes back, he should be very good. But DeAndre Hopkins has game-breaking ability.
Yeah.
Mike Evans is another guy who I would think is like a straight wide receiver swap. Both are good. I don't think Hopkins is going to or Amon-Ra St. Brown by like 50 points or anything, but that's kind of the level I'm at with how much I would pay for Hopkins if I needed him. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I mean, I think off the bat, he's an excellent target to go get, because we've seen Hopkins not only put up wide receiver 1 numbers, but like, again, we hate how situations play out, especially with an injury, but with Marquise Brown no longer playing for the next foreseeable future, like that's only going to funnel more targets to DeAndre Hopkins when he's back. I was the one who stashed DeAndre Hopkins in my league, in my home league, and I just traded him. And I did this last week before the breakout game, which is your boy is on top of it. But I traded him and J.K. Dobbins for Jamar Chase in my home league, and then Jamar Chase decided to score 35 points against the Saints, which I'm all here for. But in that instance, right, I was using Hopkins as exactly what you're saying, where it's like he could be a wide receiver 1 coming off at week 6, and for a struggling Jamar Chase. So I think if you are looking to trade for Hopkins, I think some of the guys you recommended are good targets. I also think that I always like switching positions. And so offering a running back if I'm trying to get a wide receiver, just because I feel for the most part, people who are willing to trade a position probably means that they have a surplus at that position and they're lacking elsewhere. And so if I have a surplus of running backs and I can trade you, an RB1 or an RB2 for DeAndre Hopkins, that's a move I'm willing to make.
Yeah, and I was thinking about that too. I think the switch is good, but when you get down to about the 15-25 of running backs,
yeah,
it's Dameon Pierce at 15, you're like, no way.
No.
I mean, I think RB1 rest of the way. And then you have like Antonio Gibson, it's like, no way am I trading DeAndre Hopkins for Antonio Gibson. That 10 to 20 mark
is
just
real
weird right now.
Yeah, it is. What I tend to do is I tend to like sell high on a bet, like Ramondre Stevenson. If you can trade Ramondre Stevenson for DeAndre Hopkins, like that's a move that I wouldn't be mad at, simply because we've seen obviously Ramondre Stevenson can do a lot when this backfield is his, but it's not going to be his all season. Damian Harris is going to come back eventually, and in the foreseeable future. And this offense is probably going to look different once Mac Jones returns, if Mac Jones returns.
And Mac Jones returns.
Mac
Jones, yeah.
And so after that huge game against the Browns, and where he's had back-to-back games now, I think Ramondre Stevenson it's finding those guys whom their production is probably not going to last the whole season, and you can sell high on them for a guy like DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah, I like it. And we'll stick with the running backs here. A lightning rod player that should have a much improving situation after a pretty slow start that many predicted. I was on the train, and I'm not looking to bail, but I'll bail. That's Ezekiel Elliott. So the Cowboys have had a really hard time with the Dak Prescott injury. They've been winning, but they have not been scoring a ton of points. And even people who were on Elliott, like myself, or promoting Elliott, have said, well, his value is going to come from touchdowns, and you don't want to be touchdown dependent. But when it's, number 1, 2, 3 offense in the league and you're touchdown dependent, that makes it a lot easier to stomach. Yeah. So it's been a super slow year for Zeke so far, and Pollard has really come on, which is good. And I think that's good for the Cowboys offense. But with Dak coming back, if we see a couple of more touchdowns a game, those pass interference calls in the end zone, you kind of know what's coming up next. And we only need Elliott to get us like 20 yards and a touchdown. And then we're good, because he shouldn't be your RB1. He should be RB2 flex. And that 8-9 points is good enough to get you by.
Yeah. And he's a guy whom I think if the person in your league has held on to him this far, they're fed up, right? Like maybe they're tuned in. Maybe they are like holding on to him because they're like, okay, once Dak comes back, this offense is going to be something. But I think if you send out just like a little bit, maybe it's a slight overpay, but just like a juicy offer, you're more than likely going to get a bite.
And two of the guys that I have, and I did your thing of, you want to deal from a position of strength to pick up where you're weak. So I picked 2 wide receivers. I think Juju or Cortland Sutton might be a good swap if you're fat at wide receiver.
If you're fat, yeah, for sure.
Juju, if I can do it, and not Sutton. But I mean, that's about the level that I feel we're going to get out of a position I think is more rare and harder to replace than running back.
Yeah. No, I like Zeke to have a much better second half of the year. I think you're totally right that this offense is going to look like the offense that we expected it to, with Dak Prescott coming back, because honestly, this offense didn't look bad with Cooper Rush. And so you're assuming that with the addition of Dak, things will kind of just only get better, which is great for Zeke's fantasy upside.
Yeah, like, and this is number 3 here. This is a buy low opportunity. J.K. Dobbins has come back, and he's looked okay, but he hasn't been getting a ton of work. Last week leaves the game early, and Kenyon Drake comes in and looks like his old self, but that's not true.
But when have we ever seen
who people wanted him to be?
Yeah.
Several seasons ago, but he came in and looked good. He did everything the Ravens asked him to do. He busted off a couple of good long runs and got a touchdown. He's available in a ton of leagues. So if the J.K. Dobbins owner is somehow injury averse but drafted J.K. Dobbins, this may be the time to strike. You may miss a couple of games with him, but this is a bet on the J.K. Dobbins talent, and I'm shopping around for him in leagues where I don't have him, thinking week 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, I think that he's going to be the man, and I'm willing to kind of wait on that if I have to.
Yeah. And he's a guy, I think more so than everyone on this list, both so far and in the future, I think you can get him for dirt cheap. Like, if he's had one big game, and then that game was immediately followed by 2 games where he was kind of relegated in terms of his touches, and then he left with an injury. And of course, that's going to just like completely panic any J.K. Dobbins manager, because the last thing you want is for an injury to kind of like, rise up and take things down. So yes, I think of everyone on this list, Dobbins is a guy who I think you can get for probably pretty cheap.
There's a chance. And it's hard to do trade targets because, like, unless you're in, if you're in 10, 15 leagues, okay, well then you have 10, 15 shots. But if you're just in one league and the J.K. Dobbins owner has a Lamar Jackson jersey and loves, well, okay.
Good luck. Have fun.
I mean, I don't know. But like I said, the owner could be getting skittish.
Yep.
And looking to bail.
Yeah.
So second to last guy here, near the bottom of the list for cheapest because quarterback outside of Superflex leagues is a really devalued position. But I hope we haven't forgotten about Tua Tagovailoa and how amazing that he looks in the beginning of the year in the Mike McDaniel's offense. There's been a ton of, I would say, pearl clutching around concussions and people acting like we're not watching one of the world's most brutal sports for entertainment. But anyway, Tua is expected to be back. And he was lighting teams up at the beginning of the year with Tyreek Hill leading the league in reception yards and Jalen Waddle in the top 5 as well. So if the Tua team has been struggling and you can swing a trade to get to it, even in a one quarterback league, I think if you've gone after Russell Wilson, Stafford, or Aaron Rodgers, Tua is an upgrade that you could make probably pretty inexpensively and throw in that bigger name. It might help you get there for not too much else.
Yeah, Tua still leads all quarterbacks in per rating. He's averaging 0.59 fantasy points per pass attempt, which is tops in the league.
The Mike McDaniel referendum has already come through.
Yeah.
I mean, may not be one of the best coaches in the world, whatever, but he's not out of his league.
God, no.
The Dolphins have looked good with some controversy.
Yes, 100%. His handling, and maybe it wasn't him who specifically handled the Tua injury initially, but like that handling was god awful.
It was not great.
It was not great. But we're hoping that he is fully healthy now. And we've seen him when he is healthy and in this offense with all of these weapons around him and in just a very well called play, very well called offense. Like Tua puts up elite top 3 quarterback numbers. And if you can get that, you're right. This is the cheapest you can get him at because people are, especially with there's like that uncertainty of like, is he coming back now? Is he coming back now? Is he coming back now? I feel like the Tua manager could be like, all right, I just need a quarterback. I'm like, for instance, I have Michael Thomas in two of my leagues. And if someone were to offer me something for Michael Thomas, I wouldn't say no because I'm getting a little tired of constantly putting Michael Thomas in my starting lineup. And then Thursday comes along and it's like, oh, Michael Thomas is out this week. And then you put him in your starting lineup and then it's, oh, he's out this week. So
and early outs. Being declared way early.
Not a fan.
Yeah.
Not a fan. Who's your number 1 trade target, Clark?
This dovetails very nicely because this is a kind of guy like Michael Thomas who's just been ruled out and has probably been extremely frustrating for Keenan Allen owners. Has been extremely frustrating for Keenan Allen owner, this guy at least. Keenan Allen. There is nothing preventing Keenan Allen from coming back and just absolutely dominating like I used to outside of his injury. Some other guys have filled in admirably for the Chargers, but the Chargers offense is cooking. They need a wide receiver to come in and help them because while they have been cooking, they have not been cooking like they have in the past. All Keenan Allen needs to do is that hand healthy, but the Keenan Allen owner has been watching this week after week after week, this old wide receiver, using air quotes, old wide receiver who's got a hamstring injury. You might be able to pick him up on the cheap.
Yes. 100%. Keenan Allen, let me remind you just how good this guy is. Last year, 157 targets, 106 catches, 1,138 yards, and 6 touchdowns. The year before that, 147 targets, 100 receptions, 992 yards, 8 touchdowns. And those were all on 16 and 14 games. Like year before that, if we want to go back to 2019, 149 targets, 104 yards, 1,199 yards, 6 touchdowns. Like the man is an automatic 100 plus receptions, 1,000 yards, 6 touchdowns. And he's going into an offense that's starting to find its footing. They're starting to let Justin Herbert throw the ball, not deep, but they're letting him throw the ball 56 times without a touchdown. And so, yes, Keenan Allen, and he feels like a forgotten commodity because he hasn't played since week 1. And so like, just like what I was talking about, the frustrations around Michael Thomas, I'm sure the Keenan Allen manager, unless that person is like, 5-1 and is just like, oh my gosh, I got Keenan Allen back. This is incredible.
Yeah.
likely that person is struggling to, or has been not as productive as he wants. And if you can come in and be like, look, I will give you, you have to pay for Keenan Allen, but like, I'll give you
Tony Pollard,
Yeah.
that might be a little rich, but I mean, that's kind of
but
what I'm thinking.
Right. You are getting potentially a week in, week out wide receiver one. Yeah. More so, and I would trust him more so if we talk about running wide receivers who are like coming back. The injury has me a little worried, but if we're assuming full health, I would trust him more than DeAndre Hopkins to produce on a regular basis.
And most of the listeners probably know this, but in Dynasty, you can shoot for these old guys and not pay very much if they're on bad teams. But what you do in your redraft is, let's package up a 2-for-1 for one of these bigger names, because the other team, that if they're struggling, they probably have a spot or two where they need to grow. The old 2-for-1, just great strategy. You give up two kind of like waiver wire guys who are hot for a guy like Hopkins or Keenan Allen or something like that.
I have retooled my roster in my home league with that exact strategy, where I have just been packaging up 2-for-1s. And I sent out Brandon Ayuk and Kareem Hunt for Travis Etienne, J.K. Dobbins and DeAndre Hopkins for Jamar Chase. And I had another one
and those are good trades for the other owner too.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Because it's all about roster construction. I know that's like, my wide receiver 6 and my RB3, and I'm trading those up for an RB1. Like that's how it works in the game.
If you don't send out a ton of offers on trades, you'll never know what someone might take. I mean, don't lowball everybody, but you got to try.
You got to try. Sometimes you think that you are going to lowball them, so then you overball them, and then you're like, oh, they took that trade way too easily. that happened to me. That happened to me with one of my leagues, and I was like, oh, maybe I didn't need to offer that much, but who cares? I got him now, all for Travis Etienne. I'm telling you, if Travis Etienne doesn't pan out for the rest of this year, I'm losing almost every one of my fantasy leagues.
That's right. We're probably going to lose most of our fantasy leagues anyway. You got to have fun.
We're going to have fun. That's the whole point. Clark is here to remind us to have fun. And that's all we got for you this week. Make sure you rate and subscribe to the podcast on your podcast platform of choice. And go follow us on Twitter at NerdBallFF. You can follow myself on Twitter at Pete M. Rogers. Follow Clark at NFL Clark. And of course, make sure you're checking out all the amazing content we're putting out over on the site at nerdballff.com. I got my week 7 volatility index coming out next week for starts and sits, some guys who are risky, some guys who are safe. And we got rankings. We got everything you need to win and get prepped for week 7 fantasy football. Until next week, my fellow nerds.